The ham was perfect. Golden brown, glazed with honey, and studded with cloves, sitting on my grandmother's china platter like something from a magazine cover. Tessa had outdone herself this year. I'll give her that. The dining room table practically groaned under the weight of tradition. Mashed potatoes whipped to perfection, green bean casserole with those crispy onions on top, cranberry sauce that actually came from cranberries instead of a can. "Cole, would you carve the ham?" Tessa's mother, Patricia, asked from her throne at the head of the table. Even at Christmas dinner in our house, she managed to act like the hostess. Old money habits never fade, I suppose. Of course. I stood, reaching for the carving knife, when Tessa's phone buzzed against the mahogany table. The sound cut through the warm chatter like a blade. Tessa glanced at the screen. Her face changed, just for a second, but I caught it. The same look she'd been wearing for months whenever that particular ringtone played. "I have to take this," she said, already pushing back her chair. "Now?" Her father, Richard, frowned over his wire-rimmed glasses. "During Christmas dinner? It's work, Dad. You know how the tech industry is. Crisis management doesn't take holidays." She was already walking toward the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear. "Hello, this is Tessa." I started carving the ham, listening to the murmur of her voice fade as she moved deeper into the house. Maren, Tessa's sister, caught my eye across the table and quickly looked away. That was becoming a pattern too. "This ham is incredible," I said, forcing a smile as I placed slices on plates. Tessa really outdid herself. "She's always been gifted in the kitchen," Patricia said, though her tone suggested she was talking about someone else entirely. Even as a little girl, she had such attention to detail. Attention to detail. Right, like the attention she paid to deleting text messages, or the detail she put into explaining why she needed to work late 3 nights a week. I checked my watch. 7:15. Tessa had been gone 12 minutes. "Cole, you mentioned you finished that big cybersecurity project," Richard said, cutting into his ham. "The one for the hospital network?" "Last week," I nodded, settling back into my chair. "Took 6 months to patch all the vulnerabilities. Amazing how many backdoors people leave open without realizing it." Maren shifted uncomfortably. She knew about backdoors too, apparently. 25 minutes. I could hear Tessa's voice from somewhere near the back of the house, probably in my home office. The tone was different than her work voice. Softer, more intimate. The voice she used to use with me. "Should we wait for her to start dessert?" Patricia asked, though she was already eyeing the apple pie cooling on the sideboard. "I'm sure she'll be back soon," I said, taking another bite of potatoes. They tasted like ash. 38 minutes. The conversation at the table had moved on to Richard's golf game and Patricia's book club. Maren kept checking her own phone, like she was waiting for updates from a war zone. 45 minutes. I set down my fork and stood up. "Where are you going?" Maren asked too quickly. "To check on Tessa. This seems like a long work call for Christmas night." "She's probably just handling a crisis." "I know." I walked toward the kitchen, following the sound of her voice. It led me to the back hallway, near the laundry room. She was speaking in hushed tones, but I caught fragments. "Can't keep doing this. They're starting to notice. After the holidays, I promise." I stood there for a moment, listening to my wife make promises to someone else on Christmas night. Then I turned around and walked back to the dining room. "Everything okay?" Richard asked. "Perfect," I said, reaching for my jacket from the coat closet. "Just perfect." "Where are you going?" Maren was on her feet now, panic creeping into her voice. "Out!" I grabbed Tessa's car keys from the bowl by the front door. Her Lexus keys, the ones to the car I'd bought her 3 years ago for her birthday. The car I'd paid cash for, with my name on the title. "Cole, wait." But I was already out the door, walking across the snow-covered driveway to the silver Lexus. The engine started with a quiet purr, and I backed out slowly, watching the warm glow of our dining room windows fade in the rearview mirror. I drove to my brother Danny's house across town, my mind strangely calm. Danny was spending Christmas with his in-laws in Buffalo, so his garage was empty. Perfect. I parked the Lexus inside and pulled the door down, sealing it away like evidence. The walk back to my house took 40 minutes through the snow, 40 minutes to think about phone bills and late nights and the way Maren couldn't meet my eyes anymore. 40 minutes to plan what came next. When I reached our front door, I could hear voices inside, urgent, worried voices. I didn't go in. Instead, I walked around to the back of the house, where I could see through the dining room windows. Tessa was back at the table, her face pale, her phone nowhere in sight. She was talking rapidly to her parents and sister, gesturing with her hands. Looking for me, probably. I pulled out my phone and typed a quick message. "Damon can pick you up. I'm sure he's available." Then I turned off the phone and walked back to Danny's house. I had work to do. Danny's guest room smelled like lavender and old wood. I lay on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to snow tap against the windows. My phone stayed off. Whatever explosion was happening at home could wait until morning. I'd been tracking the pattern for months without really admitting it to myself. It started as a nagging feeling, the kind of itch you can't quite scratch. Tessa working late more often, taking calls in other rooms, guarding her phone like it contained state secrets. The first time I really paid attention was Thanksgiving. We were at her parents' house in Elmwood Heights, the kind of neighborhood where every lawn looks like a golf course and every house costs more than most people make in a decade. Tessa's phone rang during dinner, and she disappeared for 32 minutes. "Work emergency," she'd explained when she came back, but her lipstick was gone and her hair looked finger-combed. Her birthday in October, 51 minutes. Our anniversary in September, 1 hour and 14 minutes. Always the same excuse. Always the same guilty look from Maren. I started keeping a notebook, not because I wanted to catch her, at least that's what I told myself, but because the inconsistencies were driving me crazy. I'm a cybersecurity consultant. Patterns are my business. When someone's behavior doesn't match their stated intentions, it usually means someone's lying. The phone records were easy enough to access. Joint account, joint billing. I pulled 3 months of data and printed it out on a Tuesday night while Tessa was at her book club. 14 pages of calls, texts, and data usage. One number appeared 847 times. I ran the number through a reverse lookup. Damon Harlow, real estate developer. Age 38, divorced. Address on Maple Street, the expensive side. I knew that name. Tessa's ex-boyfriend from college, the one she never really talks to anymore. The one who'd called her at our wedding reception to congratulate her. The one she'd mentioned running into at Starbucks last spring. Average call duration, 23 minutes. Longest call, 3 hours on Christmas Eve, while I was in the basement wrapping her gifts. I sat in Danny's kitchen at 6 in the morning, spreading the phone records across his breakfast table like evidence at a trial. The pattern was undeniable. Calls clustered around holidays, weekends, and evenings when I was working late. Text messages sent and immediately deleted. Data usage spikes that corresponded with photo and video uploads. My wife was having an affair. Had been having an affair for at least 6 months. Probably longer. The smart thing would have been to confront her, demand an explanation, suggest marriage counseling, fight for what we'd built together over 8 years. Instead, I drove to the county courthouse and filed for dissolution of marriage. The clerk, a tired-looking woman named Janet, processed the paperwork with professional efficiency. "Irreconcilable differences," she noted, stamping the forms. "Will you be representing yourself?" "For now." "You'll need to serve these papers to your spouse within 30 days. Do you want us to arrange service, or will you handle it personally?" I looked at the stack of legal documents, our marriage reduced to paperwork and filing fees. "I'll handle it personally." That was December 20th. 5 days before Christmas. 5 days to plan the perfect gift. I spent those days watching Tessa more carefully. She thought I was distracted by work, preparing for a big presentation after the holidays. Really, I was documenting everything. The way she held her phone at an angle so I couldn't see the screen. The way she showered immediately after coming home from book club. The way she'd started buying new lingerie and claiming it was for me, even though I never saw her wear it. Christmas Eve, while she was on that 3-hour call with Damon, I wrapped her real gift. The divorce papers went in a shirt box, surrounded by tissue paper. The phone records became the wrapping paper. 14 pages of evidence taped together with meticulous care. I used a silver bow. Tessa always loved silver. The gift tag was simple. For my wife. No love, Cole. No Merry Christmas. Just a statement of fact. Now, sitting in Danny's kitchen with coffee growing cold in my hands, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The uncertainty was over. The pattern was complete. Whatever happened next, at least I'd know where I stood. My phone buzzed on the table. I turned it back on to check the time, and 17 missed calls from Tessa appeared on the screen. 17 attempts to explain the unexplainable. I deleted them without listening and started planning phase 2. Niles Patterson had been my best friend since high school, back when we were both more interested in taking apart computers than talking to girls. Now he ran a small IT consulting business out of a converted garage, specializing in data recovery and digital forensics. Exactly the kind of skills I needed. "You look terrible," he said when I showed up at his place Tuesday morning. "Like you haven't slept in a week." Close enough. I handed him a cup of coffee from the drive-thru. "I need a favor." "This about Tessa?" "Marge heard some interesting gossip at the grocery store yesterday." Niles' wife Marge was plugged into the neighborhood information network like a human search engine. If she'd heard gossip, it meant Tessa's Christmas meltdown had become public knowledge. "What kind of gossip?" "The kind where your wife was calling everyone she knows Christmas night, trying to figure out where you went. The kind where she showed up at your office yesterday looking like she'd been crying." He studied my face. "The kind where people are starting to ask questions about why you're not answering your phone." I pulled out the printed phone records and spread them across his workbench. "I need you to help me understand these." Niles whistled low as he scanned the pages. 847 calls to the same number? In 3 months? 6 months, actually. I only printed the recent stuff. "Who's the lucky guy?" "Damon Harlow, Tessa's ex." "The real estate guy? The one with the billboards all over town?" Niles shook his head. "Man, I'm sorry. This sucks." "It gets worse." I showed him the call durations, the timing patterns, the data usage spikes. "I think they've been meeting in person, regularly." "You want me to dig deeper?" "I want to know everything, where they've been meeting, how long this has been going on, whether anyone else knows." I paused. "And I want to know what they're planning." "Planning?" "Tessa's not stupid. She knows I've figured it out. The question is whether she's going to try to salvage this or cut her losses." Niles fired up his computer and started typing. "Give me her email password." "I don't have it." "Sure you do. It's probably your anniversary date or your birthday or the name of your first pet. People are predictable." He was right. Tessa's email password was Bentley 2019, the year we'd bought our house on Bentley Street. I felt a twist of something that might have been sadness as I watched Niles access her account. "Bingo," he said after a few minutes. "Look at this." The screen showed email threads between Tessa and someone named D. The messages were careful, coded, but the meaning was clear enough. Lunch meetings that ran long, business trips that coincided, hotel reservations made with points from Damon's account. "Here's something interesting," Niles said, scrolling through older messages. "Look at this one from October." The email was longer than the others, less careful about coded language. Tessa was frustrated about something, worried about keeping up appearances, and managing the situation. She mentioned me by name, calling me suspicious and harder to fool than expected. She's been planning this for months, I said. Planning what? The affair or the exit strategy? That was the question. I thought about Tessa's behavior over the past few weeks, the way she'd been extra affectionate, buying me expensive gifts, talking about vacation plans for next summer. Either she was feeling guilty about the affair, or she was setting up some kind of cover story. There's more, Niles said. He'd moved on to Tessa's cloud storage account, photo uploads from locations that don't match her calendar. The photos were innocent enough, restaurant meals, hotel lobbies, city skylines. But the metadata told a different story. Timestamps and GPS coordinates that put Tessa in places she'd never mentioned, on days when she was supposed to be somewhere else. She was in Rochester 3 times last month, Niles said. According to this, she was at business conferences. According to these photos, she was at the Marriott downtown with someone who likes expensive wine. I studied the images, looking for clues about her companion. A second wine glass in most shots, a man's watch visible in one corner of a dinner photo, a reflection in a window that might have been Damon's face. Can you enhance this reflection? This isn't CSI, Cole, but I can try. While Niles worked on the photo analysis, I drove across town to gather intelligence the old-fashioned way. The Stumble Inn was the kind of blue-collar bar where construction workers and city employees went to complain about their jobs and their wives. It was also where Damon Harlow supposedly spent his Friday nights, according to his social media posts. The bartender, a grizzled man named Pete, knew everyone in town and remembered everything. He also owed me a favor from when I'd helped recover his stolen laptop last year. Damon Harlow? Pete wiped down a glass and considered the question. Yeah, I know him. Comes in here acting like he owns the place, tips like a cheapskate, but expects top-shelf treatment. He been around lately? Every Friday, regular as clockwork. Usually alone, but sometimes he brings company. Pete's eyes narrowed. Why you asking? He's been calling my wife. A lot. Ah. Pete nodded like this explained everything. Yeah, he's got a reputation for that. Likes married women from what I hear. Less complicated than dating, according to him. He talk about my wife specifically? Not by name, but he's been bragging about some new conquest since the summer. Corporate type, he said. Classy. Already married, so no pressure for commitment. Pete leaned across the bar. Sorry, man, that's rough. I left the bar with a clearer picture of what I was dealing with. This wasn't some passionate love affair or midlife crisis. For Damon, Tessa was a convenience. A married woman looking for excitement with no expectations beyond the physical. For Tessa, Damon was something else. An escape from routine, maybe. Or a backup plan. Either way, they'd both made the same mistake. They'd underestimated me. Marin lived in a converted carriage house behind one of Elmwood Heights' grand old mansions. It was the kind of place that looked charming from the outside, but felt cramped and temporary once you stepped inside, much like Marin herself. I knocked on her door Thursday evening, knowing Tessa would be at her weekly yoga class, assuming she was still maintaining that fiction. Cole! Marin's face went through several expressions in quick succession: surprise, guilt, fear, and finally resignation. I was wondering when you'd show up. Can I come in? She stepped aside reluctantly. The living room was cluttered with law school textbooks and empty wine bottles. Marin had been struggling through her 3rd year at the university, funded by her parents and a series of part-time jobs that never seemed to last. Tessa's worried about you, she said, not meeting my eyes. I'm sure she is. She thinks you might be having some kind of breakdown, disappearing on Christmas night, not answering your phone. How long have you known? The question hung in the air like smoke. Marin sank into her couch, suddenly looking much older than her 28 years. Known what? About Damon. She closed her eyes. Cole. How long, Marin? Since September. The words came out in a whisper. She made me promise not to tell anyone. You've been covering for her. She's my sister. And I'm your brother-in-law. Was your brother-in-law. I sat down across from her, trying to keep my voice level. Do you have any idea what this has been like? Knowing something was wrong but not being able to prove it? She never meant for it to go this far. What did she mean for it to go? Maren was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. She was lonely. You were working all the time and she felt like you were growing apart. When she ran into Damon last spring, it was just coffee, just talking to an old friend. And then it became more than coffee. I thought about the phone records, the hotel receipts, the carefully orchestrated lies. This wasn't some accidental affair, Maren. This was planned, systematic. I know. You helped her plan it. I gave her alibis. I covered when she needed to be somewhere else. But I never thought. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. I never thought it would destroy your marriage. What did you think would happen? I thought she'd get it out of her system. I thought she'd realize what she was risking and end it. Instead, she started talking about leaving you. The words hit me like a physical blow, not because they were surprising, but because they confirmed what I'd been afraid to admit. This wasn't a temporary lapse in judgment. This was Tessa building an exit strategy. When, after the holidays, she wanted to wait until after Christmas so it wouldn't ruin the family gathering. I almost laughed. How considerate of her. Cole, she does love you. She's just what? Confused? Going through a phase? I stood up, pacing to the window. She's been lying to me for 6 months. She's been planning to leave me while I was buying her Christmas presents and making vacation plans. She feels terrible about it. Not terrible enough to stop. Maren was crying now, ugly tears that smeared her mascara. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I should have told you months ago. Yes, you should have. What are you going to do? I turned back to face her. I'm going to make sure she gets exactly what she wants. What does that mean? It means I'm done being the understanding husband. It means I'm done pretending this is salvageable. I walked toward the door, then stopped. It means she's about to learn that actions have consequences. Cole, please don't do anything you'll regret. The only thing I regret is wasting 8 years on someone who could lie to my face every single day. I left Maren crying in her cluttered living room and drove back to Danny's house. I had phone calls to make. The first call was to my lawyer, a sharp woman named Rebecca Torres, who specialized in divorce cases. I'd found her through a colleague whose own marriage had imploded spectacularly 2 years earlier. I need to move fast, I told her. My wife is planning to file first, probably after New Year's. What's the rush? I want to control the narrative, and I want to make sure I'm protected financially. Any children? No. Shared assets? House, cars, joint accounts? But most of the major purchases were made with my income. Infidelity? Documented and provable. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. How documented? I told her about the phone records, the emails, the hotel receipts. I told her about Maren's confession and Damon's reputation around town. This is good, she said finally. Very good. New York is a no-fault state, so the adultery won't affect the divorce terms directly, but it gives us leverage, especially if she's been using marital funds for the affair. What do you need from me? Everything you've got. And Cole, don't do anything stupid. Don't confront her directly, don't threaten anyone, don't post anything on social media. Let me handle the legal side while you handle the evidence gathering. The second call was to my bank. I moved half our joint savings into a personal account, which was legally my right since the money was primarily from my income. I canceled the credit cards that were in my name, but that Tessa used for her daily expenses. The third call was to my insurance agent. I removed Tessa as the beneficiary on my life insurance policy and changed the emergency contact information on all my accounts. By the time I finished, it was past midnight. Tessa had called 6 more times and sent a dozen text messages, each one more desperate than the last. "Cole, please call me back. I know you're upset, but we need to talk. This is crazy. You can't just disappear. I'm sorry about Christmas night, let me explain. Please come home. We can work this out. I love you." I deleted them all and turned off the phone. Tomorrow, Tessa would start learning what it felt like to be on the receiving end of deception. Friday morning brought 6 inches of fresh snow and a text message from an unknown number. "This is Damon Harlow. We need to talk." I stared at the message for a long moment, then showed it to Niles. We were sitting in his garage workshop, surrounded by computer equipment and the smell of coffee and solder. "He's nervous," Niles said. "Tessa probably told him, you know." "Good. You going to respond?" "Not yet." I pocketed the phone. Let him sweat for a while. We'd spent the morning going through Tessa's digital life with surgical precision. Niles had recovered deleted text messages, traced location data, and even found cached copies of photos she'd tried to erase. The evidence was overwhelming and damning. "Look at this," Niles said, pointing to his monitor. "She's been researching divorce attorneys." The browser history showed visits to 3 different law firm websites, all within the past 2 weeks. She'd also been looking at apartment rental sites and job listings in Rochester, where Damon lived. "She's been planning this longer than Marin admitted." "Looks like it. But here's the interesting part." Niles opened another window. "She's also been researching your business, client lists, contract values, intellectual property rights." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Why would she need that information? "Good question. Unless—" Niles paused, typing rapidly. "Cole, when's the last time you changed your office passwords?" "I don't know. Maybe 6 months ago?" "And Tessa has access to your home office?" "She uses my printer sometimes." "Why?" Niles turned the monitor toward me. On the screen was a folder full of documents from my computer. Client contracts, security assessments, network diagrams. Files that Tessa had no legitimate reason to access. "She's been copying your work files." "For what?" "I don't know yet, but someone's been very interested in your client data." He showed me the access logs. "These files were copied multiple times over the past month, always when you were out of the house." My phone buzzed with another message from Damon. "I know you're getting these. Call me." This time I responded, "Stumble in, 8 p.m. Come alone." The reply came back immediately. "I'll be there." I spent the rest of the day preparing for what would either be a productive conversation or a complete disaster. I printed copies of the most damaging evidence, photos, emails, phone records. I wrote out a timeline of the affair, cross-referenced with Tessa's lies about her whereabouts. I even printed out bank statements showing how much money I'd spent on Christmas gifts while she was planning to leave me. The Stumble Inn was crowded for a Friday night, full of people trying to forget their work week, with cheap beer and loud conversation. I arrived early and claimed a corner booth where I could see the entrance. Damon walked in at exactly 8 o'clock, looking around nervously until he spotted me. He was shorter than I'd expected, with the kind of artificial tan that came from a salon, and the kind of confidence that came from money. He wore an expensive coat and shoes that had probably never seen actual snow. "Cole?" He approached the table cautiously. "Sit down." He slid into the booth across from me, keeping his coat on like he was planning a quick escape. "Look, I think there's been some misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding." I placed one of the printed emails on the table between us. "October 15th, Rochester Marriott, room 412, you and my wife." Damon's face went pale as he read his own words back to him. "How did you—" I'm a cybersecurity consultant, Damon. Finding hidden information is literally my job. This is illegal. You can't just hack into someone's private communications. Tessa's my wife. Joint account, joint access. I placed another document on the table. December 3rd, Finger Lakes Resort. You paid for dinner with your corporate card and claimed it as a business expense. You don't understand the situation. Then explain it to me. Damon looked around the bar, probably hoping no one was paying attention to our conversation. Tessa came to me. She was unhappy in her marriage, looking for someone to talk to. It started as friendship. And became what? Look, I'm not proud of this, but she's an adult. She made her own choices. I leaned forward. What I want to know is why she's been copying my business files. What? Client data, network security assessments, intellectual property. I watched his face carefully. Information that would be very valuable to certain people. I don't know anything about that. Really? Because my wife doesn't have any use for cybersecurity data. But a real estate developer who's been trying to land government contracts might find it very interesting. Damon's expression shifted from confusion to something that looked like panic. You're fishing. Am I? I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo Niles had found. Damon and Tessa at a restaurant, with a third person whose face was partially visible. Who's your friend? I'm not answering any more questions. Then let me tell you what I think happened. I gathered up the papers and put them back in my folder. I think you and Tessa started this affair for fun, but then you realized she had access to valuable information through me. Information you could use to underbid competitors or identify security vulnerabilities in potential targets. That's insane. Is it? Because if I'm right, this isn't just adultery anymore. This is corporate espionage, and that's a federal crime. Damon stood up abruptly. This conversation is over. Sit down. Sit down, or I call the FBI field office in Rochester and tell them about your sudden interest in government security contracts. He sat down. Here's what's going to happen, I said calmly. You're going to end this affair. Tonight. You're going to tell Tessa it was fun while it lasted, but you're done, and you're going to stay away from my wife and my business. And if I don't, then I turn over everything I've found to the appropriate authorities and let them sort out whether you've been using pillow talk to commit federal crimes. Damon stared at me for a long moment. You're bluffing. Try me. He left without another word, pushing through the crowded bar like the building was on fire. I finished my beer and drove back to Danny's house, feeling better than I had in weeks. My phone rang as I was getting ready for bed. Tessa. Cole, what did you do? Good evening to you too. Damon called me. He said you threatened him. I had a conversation with him, man to man. He said you accused him of stealing from your clients. Did I? I don't remember that. This is insane. You can't just... I can't what, Tessa? Protect my business from people who want to exploit it? Defend my marriage from people who are trying to destroy it? It's not like that. Then what is it like? She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, smaller, more uncertain. I made a mistake. Which mistake? The affair or getting caught? Both. Too late. Cole, please, come home. Let's talk about this like adults. Adults don't lie to each other for 6 months. Adults don't steal confidential information. Adults don't plan to abandon their marriages while their spouses are buying them Christmas presents. How did you know about your exit strategy? Lucky guess. I hung up and turned off the phone. Tomorrow was Saturday. Time to finish what I'd started. Saturday morning, I drove to our house on Bentley Street for the first time since Christmas night. Tessa's car was in the driveway, a rental since I still had her Lexus locked in Danny's garage. I used my key to let myself in, calling out as I entered. Tessa, we need to talk. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, her eyes red from crying. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. "Cole." She moved toward me hesitantly. "Thank God you're home." "I'm not home. I'm here to collect some things and discuss the terms of our divorce." "Divorce?" She stopped walking. "Cole, we can work this out. What happened with Damon was a mistake, but it's over now. He ended it last night." "I know. I asked him to." "You what?" I sat down at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten breakfast together every morning for 3 years. "I had a conversation with your boyfriend. Explained the situation from my perspective. He's not my boyfriend. What would you call him? It was just... We were just..." She struggled for words. "It wasn't serious. 847 phone calls in 6 months, hotel rooms, romantic dinners, planning to leave me after the holidays." I pulled out the folder of evidence and set it on the table. What part of that wasn't serious? Tessa stared at the folder like it contained explosives. "You've been spying on me." "I've been protecting myself. Good thing, too, considering what I found." "What do you mean?" I opened the folder and showed her the printouts of my stolen business files. "Want to explain why you've been copying confidential client data?" Her face went completely white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Tessa, I have the access logs, I have timestamps, I have evidence that you copied sensitive security information and shared it with Damon." I leaned forward. "What I don't have is an explanation for why my wife decided to commit corporate espionage. It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" She sank into the chair across from me, her hands shaking. "Damon asked me about your work sometimes. He said he was curious about cybersecurity, thinking about upgrading his company's systems." "So you gave him classified information about my clients?" "I showed him some general stuff, nothing specific. Network diagrams for the hospital system, security assessments for the county government, client lists with contact information." I read from the access logs. "That's not general stuff, Tessa. That's industrial espionage." "I didn't know..." "You didn't know that stealing confidential business information was wrong? You didn't know that betraying your husband's trust was a crime?" She started crying again, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no desire to comfort her. Just a cold satisfaction that the truth was finally out in the open. "What do you want?" she asked through her tears. "I want you to sign these." I pulled out the divorce papers and set them in front of her. No contest, no demands for alimony, no claims on my business assets. "And if I don't?" "Then I turn over everything I've found to the district attorney and let them decide whether to press charges for theft of trade secrets." "You wouldn't." "Try me." She read through the papers slowly, her tears dripping onto the legal text. "This gives you everything. The house, the cars, the savings accounts. The house I bought with my income, the cars I paid for with my money, the savings I accumulated through my work." I stood up. "The work you tried to steal. Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not my problem anymore." "Cole, please. I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work through our problems." "Our problems?" "Tessa, you had an affair. You stole from my business. You planned to abandon our marriage while pretending everything was fine." I walked toward the door. "Those aren't problems. Those are choices. Your choices. I love you." I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. "No, you don't. You love the security I provided. You love the lifestyle my income made possible. You love having someone to fall back on while you explored other options." I turned to look at her one last time. "But you don't love me. If you did, none of this would have happened." I left her sitting at the kitchen table, divorce papers spread out like a map of her future. My phone started ringing before I reached my car, but I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. That evening, I met Niles at the Stumble Inn to celebrate. The bar was crowded with the usual Friday night crowd, plus a few unfamiliar faces who kept glancing in our direction. Word's getting around, Niles said, raising his beer. Marge heard from 3 different people today that Tessa Veldon got caught cheating on her husband. Small towns, I said. Pete told me Damon hasn't been in since last night. Apparently he's been telling people he's thinking about relocating his business. Probably a good idea. You hear from Tessa? 17 calls. I didn't answer any of them. She signed the papers? Not yet, but she will. How can you be sure? I pulled out my phone and showed him a text message I'd received an hour earlier. Papers signed, left them on kitchen table. I'm staying with my parents. Well, that's that, Niles said. How do you feel? I thought about the question seriously. How did I feel? Relieved, certainly. Vindicated. Free from the weight of uncertainty and deception that had been crushing me for months. I feel like myself again, I said finally. Any regrets? Just one. What's that? I should have done this 6 months ago. We finished our beers and walked out into the cold December night. Snow was falling again, covering the town in a fresh layer of white, clean, new, full of possibility. My phone buzzed with one final message from Tessa. I'm sorry. I deleted it without responding and turned off the phone. Tomorrow was a new day, and I had a life to rebuild. But tonight, for the first time in months, I was going to sleep peacefully. The Christmas gift I'd given myself, the truth, had turned out to be the best present of all.